everybody is here for. I would like to introduce our speaker for the month, character and creature designer, Kyo, I'm getting it wrong, aren't I? Kyo Tagawa. Take it away.
Yeah. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. I am like truly honored to be doing this. This is awesome. So I'm gonna go and share my screen here, and basically what I'm gonna talk about tonight is what I do and kind of where I got my start and how I ended up here. Because it's been a journey. So let me get this shared. Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Yeah.
So, as Bill mentioned, I am a creature artist, I'm a concept artist, and basically in the game industry. I'm like getting my start essentially, but I've been at this for quite a while.
Touch anything.
So,
If I touch something, I mess it up.
um,
Thank you.
so I'm going to be explaining basically how I ended up doing this. And to start off, kind of go do a nice blast from the past of back when I was but a wee lad. Um, Basically, I've loved drawing things like since I was a kid, like since I could have like a pencil essentially, or just anything I could just write with. I like just drawing stuff, and I always liked like monsters and creatures. This has been kind of like a passion of mine. But this is some stuff from I think middle school and some grade school stuff that I kind of had that I've had because I've managed to keep most of it, not all of it, but I've had most of it kind of sitting in the back. But let's see here, going through my notes. So I did mention previously before that I'm a concept artist and creature designer, and I am just gonna go over pretty quickly like what is a concept artist and like the difference between that and say illustration, because it is something that there's still a pretty big misconception about what concept art is versus what illustration is. So I spoke past my slides, but current art versus past art. So these are all my original works. And this one this one. This one was a commission, but the rest of them were just like these are all my original designs, all my original work. So, into yes, what is concept art? So, illustration is more what you see on like the left side of the screen. It's more of a polished final image that is it looks cool. How I categorize it personally as an illustration, it looks cool. It's presentable to the public. It's something you want to show off. Whereas concept art is a visual research paper, essentially. It's like it's a 2D blueprint. So here's how to make the thing. Here's the thing I came up with, and here's how to make it. Here's how it functions, etc., etc. So like with this one here, this was a bio soldier that a friend of mine commissioned me. He just provided me with a few words and like what his idea was. He just wanted some bipedal soldier in rough like World War One era, and he wanted a grim dark setting. So it's in kind of like dark fantasy-esque diesel punk. And so he's kind of just like let me have the wheel, and I this is kind of what I came up with. And he had this idea for a VR, like it would be in a VR game. So I just took it from the perspective of, this arm cannon, which would be, if the player had this, like, how would they see it? How would it operate? How would they know when to reload it or if it was overheating? And I have a bunch of like little tiny notes here. I think it's probably too small for me to zoom in, but it was essentially showing, how the canister looked, how it sat on their back, what it functioned, like what it does, and explain, what this design is, essentially. And I know another name for concept art is pre-production art, because it's essentially everything you see in, games, movies, like TV shows, like sets and stuff. Like creatures, like someone designed that. They had to go and come up with it, and usually it's like a team of people who like come up with stuff. This is another one I did. This was more of a original design based off a pre-existing idea. But I wanted to go make what my character in a game, he has like a companion, and then what that companion would look like. Because there wasn't, well, basically the customization options we had I didn't find one that I've like wanted aesthetically, and I go, well, I'll just make it. Like I'll make the one I want, and this is the one he canon has. So because I like to write lore and stuff for my characters. Another big part of concept art is thumbnailing. And this is, I would say this is probably like one of the like most fun parts of concept art for me, is just getting to like a sit down and just go nuts at a sheet of paper for a while. And so these are some of my thumbnails for this like this was for like a bestiary I was starting to do. Sometimes I will go and take a gray marker and then basically fill like a shape and then basically draw inside the shape. And sometimes I'll just take a like a gel pen and I'll just start sketching. And I typically like sketching with a pen because it doesn't give my brain a chance to go, oops, like let's erase that. It's like it's on the paper, it's there, you can't take it back. And like you're gonna stick with it. Because like thumbnailing, it's loose, it's quick, it's supposed to be fun. You just get ideas on a page. You're not trying to refine anything, you're just having just fun and just getting those ideas out there. And I've kind of floated around between like I explored if I was like, well, am I really a creature artist? I like doing character stuff. I like doing things like hard surface and they call like weapon art, like mechs and stuff, vehicles. And I circled back to doing creatures because I go, I love doing like drawing dark fantasy and fantasy as creatures and sci-fi. That is like my bread and butter. It's what I love. I'm a huge nature. I love nature. It's one of the reasons why I moved out here. I just love how it's the beauty of nature, how you can just have so many weird things that exist, and you wouldn't think that like there's plenty of things I've shown friends of mine, these like like obscure creatures and these animals that we have that exist in our world, and that's only the ones we know of. And they go like, there's so much creativity you can have with just like doing creature art. So, how did I get here? Also, one thing I didn't touch on. So one thing I had to learn when I was making during making my portfolio, it's an ongoing process, is since I want to go work in game art specifically, the difference between want to work for, say, like an indie studio versus like the bigger, like fancier places with bigger teams. And essentially, if you want to work indie, you're more generalist because, smaller teams, you have to wear more hats, there's more things you have to go do. And versus say like double triple A where you get really big teams that work on these projects, you have to really specialize. So I was like, I want to hyper specialize in creature art. As like my long-term goal, I would love to be a studio artist. I know like things are kind of like up in the air and all over the place right now in like the past year and so, but I still want to be a studio artist. Like I want to experience, that environment and see how it is for myself. So how did I get here? Well, I was born in the mid 90s and we had a home. My first console, as it were, was actually a PC. Um, little known fact here, but I have never touched a Mario game. I never had Nintendo growing up. We had our home computer and then my dad later got an Xbox. So those were like that was my first intro to gaming, as it were. And my dad was actually the gamer, believe it or not. And so he just kind of got kicked off by two games, which was StarCraft and Diablo. He bought the Battle Chest, it was a big edition that had like all the games in it. It had like strategy guides. They had books in there, which had some of the artwork in there for like the demons and stuff that are in these games. And I loved flipping through it and going back to the very back of the book where they have like the bestiary and seeing all the creatures that you got to fight. Because I love looking at them because they just look really cool. And two big influences in that was one was Samwise. I have a big like Art of Blizzard art book, so I took some pictures of like the art I remember in the strat guide. But I saw these and I was like, these are really cool because I hadn't seen anything else like that. And it was just like, this is really cool stuff. And I would like try to go copy it and stuff. And the other one was Chris Metzen. You probably will like throughout some of my work, you'll probably see like some of that influence. I love. He's a writer. He does more writing now, but I really love just the detail he put in his work because you can just see like I love narrative storytelling and this all these little just all these little embellishments on like the Space Marine's armor. It just kind of gives it personality, it gives it like character, and I really like I love story because like you're telling a story. Even if you're doing concept art, you're still doing you're communicating a story. Like who is this character? Who is this creature? Where does it live? Does it have battle scars? What is it? Does it have scales or feathers? Like that tells you things about like what things are. But like those were like my very like early influences, and I was like 5 or 6 at the time, I think I was. And I would get in trouble at school for drawing like Space Marines fighting Zerg. And like that's where my head was because back then, being like a gamer and everything, it wasn't something to be proud of back then. It was very like, you're just in like the whole stereotypical like thought of like someone being in their parents' basement and just like being a nobody essentially. And when I kind of was like, I want to do game art, I remember some of my teachers actively being like, "That's you might want to think like an actual career because that's not an actual job." It's so weird, like thinking back to those days. But I got lost here for a second. So I was kind of like the Diablo and like StarCraft. Watching my dad play it. I eventually got to play it a little bit, and then my dad got an Xbox, and I think a year after that, he got Halo. And this is where everything just kind of took off for me because I had never seen a game like this before. It was just something I'd never seen before. Just complete like different world and everything. And I was like, this is amazing. And I got obsessed with it. Like I was all over draw. I was making like my own like characters based off of some of the alien races in the game. I was trying to draw them. And I remember I was around 8 or 9, I think it was. And I approached my dad. He was playing Diablo 2 at the time. And I was like, I want to work for Halo. Those were my words exactly because I didn't know like what a publisher or like a studio was. And he actually took the time to point out on the box like what the names and everything were on the box and to like look it up and stuff. And he goes like like Microsoft and like because Xbox was made by Microsoft. So he told me about this is a person who made this thing. So this is the people and like Bungie's the people who made this game originally. So I was like, oh, so I want to work for like the studio then. And when I was really serious about it, I was a kid, he turned to me and he paused his game and he goes, "You're serious?" He goes, he goes, "You're serious?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to go like draw for video games." And he told me word for word, he goes, "You can't half-ass this." He goes, "If you half-ass this, he goes, you're not gonna make it." He goes, "The people you see in those books that you like looking at," he goes, "you have to be better than them." And that was like what he told me. And me being this, like naive kid was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm not gonna draw stuff for a living. But he was supportive. Despite him wanting me to be like a chemist, he was supportive of like that career path. Like both my parents were. In fact, they were kind of artsy in their own rights. So that's basically kind of like what kind of kickstarted it all. And I was kind of just doing my own thing until essentially I graduated high school and I kind of realized like, oh heck, like life is starting. Like what the hell am I gonna do? It's like okay. Because I was just kind of like going through the actions and not really realizing like I was growing up. It wasn't quite the gears weren't quite turning. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll go for, art because I can draw and like I like drawing. And so I got into it wasn't art school, it was more of like a generic university, but got into it. It's great. I was really happy I enjoyed it more, but I began to through the time growing up, we didn't have home internet. So there was a lot of like culture stuff I was kind of isolated from. And during that, like I would go to like the business center of our apartment complex or like the library to go on the computer, but I wasn't online. So I had time to draw and just kind of be in my own world and like read books and stuff. But after a while, I noticed that it's like when the later Halo games came out, that I had the misconception that Bungie had become 343. I didn't had realized they had split. And so I thought I was like, oh, well, the place I want to work for doesn't exist anymore, so I don't know what I want to do. And so I went to university for this computer animation is what I went for. I was like, well, I'll go like make like those fancy Final Fantasy cinematics they have. Not realizing that it takes teams of people to make those cinematics and those short like animations. I didn't realize that. I didn't know about the process. And I didn't find this out until I was like halfway through college. And I realized I go, okay, I can't be like a one man CG studio. Like it's just, uh it's not feasible, it's not realistic. And so I kind of had to reprioritize and figure out like, well, what am I doing? And through all this, we ended up moving from I had grown up essentially for 15 years in an apartment complex, and we ended up moving from there to this we're still in Colorado. But we moved to a place just outside of Denver. It's called Aurora. And basically, family tragedy happened. My dad was he was sick. He had like respiratory issues, but he had cancer. We didn't know it until it was basically too late. But he passed in 2015, and I was like halfway through school, and that kind of killed a lot of my drive for a few months because my dad and I like he was the one who gamed with me. Like we played Halo co-op all the time. He didn't like doing like the player versus player. He taught me how to like work with someone. He goes, "This is how you work on a team with someone. This is how you communicate." Like he kind of used it as a teaching tool for me. But like that was my player too, was like my dad. And once he was gone, I just kind of was like I couldn't touch Halo for years without breaking down crying. And I was like, I can't play anything because it's just too painful. I'm like, maybe I just will stop gaming. And I was kind of on that boat because I didn't know what to do. And a guy I had met, he was like, well, there's this game called Destiny. Have you heard of it? And I was like, well, no. And we had just gotten our home internet in like later end of 2015. He's like, well, there's this game called Destiny. You should try it. And so I go buy it for the PlayStation 3, and that ushered in a whole new age. Um, First off, I didn't realize that Bungie had split off. Like they were still Bungie, and I hadn't realized that. So when I turned on the game and saw the name there, I was like, wait, hold up, wait, they're still around. And then I looked on, I actually like Googled it, and I was like, oh, wait, they're two different studios. They're not like, and I was like, oh wow, okay. And so I played this game, and like Halo before it, I got hooked, like hard. I got hooked, and I just fell in love. Was like I fell in love with this game. In fact, it's because of this game I'm actually here. It has played a major pivotal role in my life. But so in 2015 and 2016, I just was like, oh yeah, Halo. I kind of put my nose down to my studies, was just trying to kind of distract myself from, loss of my dad and everything. And before I knew it, 2017 hit, I had graduated college and I was like, okay, I'm ready to get a job in like game art. And I quickly realized as I started to apply to places that I knew nothing about the field that I wanted to do, like concept art. I knew nothing about it. And I wasn't skill-wise ready. I didn't had practiced the right things, and I was like, oh, this is bad. And in it was about between like 2017 to 2018, I was kind of floundering a little bit, and I about quit because I realized how hard the field I want to pursue really was, and how in demand it was, and I was like, and how good you have to be. And after going through school for 4.5 years, it was really disheartening. And I was really crushed about it. So I had the brilliant idea, and like, if you want to, um, I was like, well, because I was playing League of Legends at the time, I was like, well, what if I pursue a professional career in esports and be an artist? Because I can do both those things, right? And that quickly, the League thing ended up taking kind of full center stage. I kind of stopped doing art for about 3 or 4 months because dude, it got hard, and I was like, this is a lot. I'm basically starting over from zero, and I was like, well, I'm good at gaming. I've been competitive, so why don't I just do this? Didn't quite work out, um, but I did walk out of it with a greater appreciation for my artwork. And so I started on this. It was my first kind of like return back because I was cold emailing professionals because I didn't know where to turn to. After just getting out of school, I was like, I'm not looking to get back into school because that's expensive. I don't have the money for that. And I was like, I don't know who to help. I don't know what programs there are. Like, what do I do? And I reached out to a local studio in Denver, and their art director at the time actually emailed me back, and he goes, "Why don't you just stop by?" And I was like, "Okay." And he actually sat down with me for about an hour, hour and a half, and took time out of his day, and he just talked to me about what, what path I was studying, what path I want to go on, and just, like what did I want? And he told me about being more confident in my artwork because he could see the lack of confidence I had at the time. And I was kind of shocked that he just kind of called me out on it. So I wasn't quite sure at the time if I wanted to be an illustrator, like, with Hearthstone, like Riot, they have like big, gorgeous splash illustrations. And because back during, I believe it was like 2018, 2019, there was the whole speed painting craze where he had all like the YouTubers that are young, like, ah, yeah, I drew this painting in 4 hours. Like, this is how professionals do it. And I had that misconception again. And I thought, like, oh, this t stuff takes, it's easy. And the gentleman who I was talking to, he goes, no, he goes, this stuff takes, like, it takes weeks. It can take longer than that, depending on, size, scale. And he kind of, like, nudged me on the right path. And so I had taken Basic Dragon from the studio is called Direwolf Digital, and they have a card game. And I took a dragon from it, and I was like, "What if I had made a card for it?" So that's what this project was, and kind of rehashed it out. And eventually, it took me like 4 months because I was like trying to learn things, and then what you see on the left was the result of that. And in the advice he told me, good job. He goes, now repeat that 20 more times. He goes, not as far as the same piece, but like put that much effort into a piece and keep going. And so that's what I started doing. I was like, well, I'm gonna take this more seriously. And I was going through a lot of personal stuff at the time. So I was like, okay. And I started kind of realizing, like, do I want to do concept art or do I want to do illustration? I kind of was like floating like this for a bit. And so I started looking, like resources online, concept art portfolios, and I realized, well, concept art's not illustration. You want like breakdowns and stuff. You want more technical drawings. So since I love Destiny so much, I was like, well, why don't I just go take an idea for a character we heard in lore that we hadn't seen yet? And I was like, well, if I go and decide to go make it? And so I did some thumbnailing. I ended up kind of like fully rendering this whole piece out and everything. And it kind of let me on. I was like, well, like as I drew more and more things kind of like in the Destiny universe, I kind of started realizing, well, what about like what I want? Like what makes this my art? And so I started straying from that to doing something that was more like, well, let's take my character. Because I like writing as a hobby. So I had like lore for him. And I go, I like this bow in a game, but what if I made a bow for him? And I did it from the perspective of I was working for Bungie, for example, and I was in the concept art department, and like I was making this bow. How would I do that? And so that's why I made this. I made Dusk. And through this time, I ended up getting a part-time job. And in 2020, pandemic hit, which for me it was a really good thing for me at the time. Because I was working for GameStop and I realized I was like, I don't want to be stuck doing this for the rest of my life. I don't want to be stuck just working some menial job that doesn't go anywhere. Like I got really scared all of a sudden. I was like, I don't want to be stuck like doing this. And when COVID hit, they shut the location I was working at, we shut down for about a month and a half. And so I got unemployment, and it was enough where I was able to get two mentorships with two artists that I greatly respected. And so I did that, and I invested in learning material. So I got a slew of books, two of which were How to Draw and How to Render by Scott Robinson. And I studied those religiously for like basically next year or so. And then I finished out that year working at GameStop and I left because I was like, I want to be, yeah, I want to go like just draw full time. So in 2021, I actually took a trip out to Washington State because I was like, well, I want to go, like, I want to actually, like, go somewhere where there's, there's game studios and stuff. And like, I've always wanted to go to PAX. So I was like, well, I have the money, I saved up money. And I was like, well, let's go to PAX. So I went with a friend of mine. And in 2021, which I think was their first PAX it was still during the pandemic. But I knew it was called Indie PAX. It was pretty small. And that was my first trip up to Washington. And I kind of fell in love with just like kind of just felt the scenery and everything there. It was green, and it also got me out of my shell because for the first time I was meeting fellow gamers and like game devs. There was a few people we had met who decided like they were kind enough to talk to us and tell us about their journey and that and like what the kind of world we were getting into and how like the difficulties of it and how it wasn't easy. And so I came back because I stayed for about a week and then came back to Colorado and I was like, okay, well, like I would like to eventually like live up in Washington State and like go back to PAX. And was still trying to figure myself out. And so in 2023, I well actually let me go back up a little bit. So from 2021 to about 23, I was like, well, I'm gonna go full time into freelancing. Like now's the time. I have pretty decent handle on my skills now. Let me really go for it and try to like get hired as a get working in a studio, freelancing, something. And it was a bit of a journey because I found out there was a local game dev group, SIGDA. It was the Game, yeah, Colorado Indie Game Developers Association. Very little small community out there, and I kind of became a regular with them. But I started having a different issue that got really frustrating really fast, which was either people were flaky or I would try to, when I would want to work on someone's project and they would see my work and they're like, I can't afford you. And I was like, I haven't given you a number. I just want to like work on a project. And they're like, well, I can't afford you. I cannot. Like I would feel bad. And I'm like, okay, okay. And that happened for about a year and a half to 2 years. And I got really, really frustrated by it. To the point where I kind of threw my hands up and I go, you know what? If I had to break down every door if I have to go to every person and just be obnoxious about it, I go, I want to show that I'm here and I want work. And I'm gonna figure out a way. I was like, I don't know how, but I'm gonna figure out a way. And I go, I need to move. And I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And it was a lot of there's a lot of like self-doubt you have when you're working so hard on something and it's just not going the way you want it to. And so it was me fighting myself, my own brain. And in 2023, because I reached out to a mutual friend who was like, hey, if you want to do convention, like, convention work, like, let me know. And so I asked him, I was like, I'll take you up on that. So April 2023, I volunteered to like help him at his table. And I was like, this is pretty fun. I like this. This is cool. And I ended up really liking it. So he encouraged me to apply for a novice artist program hosted by a local convention, where the table is free for first-time tablers to just kind of get them into the setting as long as they had their stuff. And so I did that. And I just kind of fell in love with it. I was like, I get to be here, I get to present my artwork. And so, oh, oh my gosh, there we go. Um, so I started doing convention work. And I started because I go, well, if I'm doing like these illustrations like in my free time, I'm not doing concept art. I go, well, I can still like like passive income, and I can also keep myself out there and meet people. And so 2023, I did one convention officially, and then this past year, I actually did. I think I did four because I really just love the fact I can go out and just talk to people and be genuine about like my passion for like doing creature work and creating things and like this is my journey and encouraging others to do the same thing and like letting them know like this is not an easy thing to go do. So I ended up picking a part-time job in 2023 while also doing convention work. It was a non-art job, but it paid well. And because I go, well, if I'm gonna move, I need to like get back up my savings and everything, get things in order. And the kind of event horizon was when I was getting to about a year being at that company, which it was a good company. It was like the best job I had. To that point, it was kind of that precipice where you're ready, you're gonna take that leap off that cliff. And it's like once I jump and leave the cliff, there's no going back from this. Because it was a pretty good job and I could have like stayed there and just like been like I could have settled essentially. And I was like, I'm committing to this. Like this is me once again committing myself, and that's what I'm gonna go do. Because I go, I can't live just working a job that's not my art. I go, I love it too much. I can't put it down. And as I so at it was April of last year, I quit my job and moved out here with a friend of mine in late May and to Washington State. And like week one, I was already boots on the ground. I was like, I'm gonna go to these meetups. I'm gonna find every community I can. I'm gonna go and just introduce myself and just get involved as much as I possibly can. Because I go like it's like seeing how like all the arts and everything in the Pacific Northwest, and like seeing all the like art in the buildings and the people, and how many art shops there were. I was like this feels right. And then I had things started falling in place. As soon as I moved out here, I had a long-term client who he hadn't commissioned me in like 3 years. He reached out to me out of the blue, out of nowhere. He was like, "Hey, like I have a long-term project. Can you help me on this?" And I was like, "Sure." And it was just kind of like the universe was like, "No, like you're committing, so okay, like let's go." And I know that one of those meetups is actually where I met Bill, and essentially that's kind of how I've ended up here. And like within I would say what is May, so just over 6 months. There's been a lot of changes and a lot of things have happened since then, and that's essentially how I've ended up on Macy here in Washington State. Like that's my journey thus far and how I got here. So basically, I've been looking into like now I've gotten more of a handle on myself, and I'm I guess successfully freelancing to an extent, but I'm actually prepping a like new portfolio that's like just my work for the GDC, which is coming up, the Game Developers Conference, because I know myself, I've been developing my skills. I'm still developing my skills, but I know that I really want like that goal I set out for, which is like I want that studio job, and I want to see where this journey takes me. And that's essentially like how I've ended up here and how I've gotten here, essentially. So, uh, yeah,
Thank you for the story of how you got to the point you are.
yeah,
Can we see some more of your artwork,
of
especially most
course.
recent and future projects? Thank
Let's
you.
see. One of the projects I can't show, unfortunately. But what I can is let me see here. Um, that's the one thing too that's been kind of killing me a little bit is like working around NDAs can be really tricky because officially I haven't updated my portfolio since the beginning of 2023, but I've done a
Well,
lot
is
of
there
work since
anything
then.
else from your past portfolios we could take a look at?
Oh,
Because
there
we'd like to
definitely
see some
is.
more of your art, actually.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Thank you.
Let's see here. Fine. Oh, let me. How do I switch to screen share to use my desktop?
Turn it on and off again, I believe.
Gotcha. Okay. It's a simple thing. Got it. So,
When you do screen share, just
yeah,
you show your desktop and that way you're able to see everything.
I'm just getting the correct screens up here. There we go. Okay. Screen. Do this.
Yep.
I'm trying to navigate the window, sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is my portfolio, but one of the recent projects I can share is I had one of the I had a local comic artist like reach out to me, and we were working on a bestiary, but he essentially gave me free license. He goes, "Just make stuff for like this universe." And I was like, "Sure." So this is something we have in the works. We're kind of on a hiatus right now. But this is my little it's like a little hedgehog squirrel that like this he abducts baby birds and eats them. But this is some of the more recent stuff I've been doing, leaning into like really breathing more life into my work because I didn't like how stiff it was before. So I wanted to really make it come alive. And so I've been doing that. I had how I like sketched him out and like he has compound eyes and everything, how he goes and jumps in and out of like these concrete ruins and stuff and like abducts these birds and how he protects himself essentially. And then like essentially my little yeah, my little thing called my murder deer, which this is all based off a mythological creature called, I believe the pronunciation is a Parisian. I think that's what the pronunciation is. But they were thought to be lost travelers who had lost their way and died on their journey. And so they became one of these, and they have no shadow. Like if their shadow is actually that of a human.
Can I make a quick comment here?
Yes.
It almost seems to be a badge of honor in gaming and comics, etc., to not being able to draw horses. So you just lost that badge because that's not bad.
Really? I didn't know
That's
that.
not. You've got nice action. You've got nice use of the joints. You're actually, well, you're hiding the fetlocks because those are always difficult, but you've got an understanding of the bones. So points for that, and nice wings too.
Thank you. You. Let me see if there's. I think. Let me check here. I have some other stuff too. Um, I just for an art jam. I just for an art jam. It was hosted by Seattle Indies. It was a little quick idea, but it was essentially like the king of the willow wisps, the king of them. And he has these little attendants where they'll go and like guide like travelers through the swamps. But if you are like a bad person, they'll guide you to him and he'll devour you. So it was a little quick thing I did in a couple weeks for essentially an art jam. And I had just a lot of fun just making this. And it was also kind of a test for myself to see how quick I could just kind of get something done from sketch to kind of like just like more or less finished concept. So I had a whole bunch of like lore I made for him and like what he is. Which this isn't actually fire, it's his fur is bioluminescent. Because it was to kind of lend some, it was a nod to the actual science behind the myth with like how the smog gas interacts with the air and everything. So I had him. And that's as far as stuff. I can't see. And then I've been doing some print work and stuff too. So I did like this as I did this past year. Yeah, exactly. 2024 is last year now. But I did this. This is more of like a fan piece. It's kind of done in like my style because I like doing. I've kind of strayed away from doing things really super clean because I like being a little messy. I think it just lends like a little character to a piece. And I like how I like that strong, I guess that ink, that contrast. Like I like it in my work. So like other things I've done where I did this, but and as far as recent accomplishments, I don't have them with me, but my work was actually published in a local comic book in Colorado for one of the covers. We actually had this piece on the cover for their Halloween edition. So we had this piece, which is kind of like my little version of Anubis. And then my grotesque rabbit. This guy is disgusting, but I love him because I don't have all my notes up here for him, but I put a lot of work into this guy. Call my rot rabbit. He has a symbiotic relationship with these birds, and they're called I call them blood birds because they exist exclusively on blood. The inspiration came from a finch. I believe it's in the Galapagos. It's called the bloodfinch, and they are birds that literally feed off of blood. They will go and pick at the skin of like the birds that nest there, and they'll just lap up their blood. And so I had this idea of like this gross like scavenger that has a symbiotic relationship where they'll fight over like essentially the most fittest can kind of like perch on his back, and they eat like this waxy substance that it secretes. And it's really rich for them because they live in a wasteland essentially, so there's not much food around. So like this guy scavenges off the corpses and stuff, but like they benefit off of it, and they kind of like have a little ecosystem based off this relationship with this creature. And I had where this is my initial drawing of him. It was kind of like cutesy, and I kind of just kept pushing it, just like this to go more and more just gross, where eventually we have like this monstrosity.
Okay, now I'm curious. What does he get out of it? The birds get food. What does he get?
So the birds also they'll scout prey for him. They can since they can fly, they'll scout if there is either like if there's carrion, or what they'll also do because their beaks are razor sharp, they can infect because like they're eating this stuff. It can infect they can open wounds on healthy animals and infect them and get them sick. And if they're sick, they start slowing down and they're like, hey, there's this, there's prey, and he'll take them down because this thing is roughly the size of a grizzly bear. And it's lumbering and slow, but it's powerful. Like he can break out into bursts of speeds as bears can do. Like they can run deceptively fast. But
It's no weirder than anything we actually have or have had on this planet.
right?
We've
Like
had some weird stuff.
there is some really like I love looking into insects, like birds, plants even. I love binging nature documentaries because like there's just so many cool things to like to stoke your curiosity. And I like making, an ecosystem about like, where does this thing live and how does it interact with things around it? Um so like this one was really I love making this and like the whole like symbiotic relationship with these birds and everything and like what they do. And these are the birds where the squirrel you saw earlier. Their chicks get robbed out of the nest by like those little thorny squirrels. So if they're around this guy, they're safe. It's only like when they're nesting, they're vulnerable, which is like this kind of balances out. Because squirrels in nature they're omnivorous. They'll eat meat just as they'll eat like anything they can get
Hmm.
their hands on, really. So, and baby birds are on that menu. So, I think anything else I would have is in my sketchbook. But that pretty much as far as like digital stuff, that's about all I have. And this is kind of because not all this is public because like I've taken old stuff down, but this is
Hmm.
kind of like my work over the past 5 years. So it's been like I had a stint where I was trying to be like a Pokemon fan artist and do like speed paint videos, and I burned myself out doing that because I was posting a video every week and trying to do a full illustration in like 6 to 8 hours. It was horrible. It was really bad. So like I've had it's been definitely a journey, like coming between how I started and then kind of restarting again and where I am now. And I am definitely not the same artist I was then. Um, like I redid this piece as this piece. I think this was like a couple years difference. This piece, funny story, if I may, about this piece right here. This actually got me banned from a Facebook group because they thought I plagiarized my own art. They thought I took my own art. They're like, "You didn't draw that." I was like, "But I did." So there was a. I remember I was joking to my friends, like, "Well, did I make it as an artist?" Like, I just got kicked out of a group for copying my own work, and then I later redrew it. Like this full project here. I later redrew him as this, where I did like a full call out for him and everything. So,
Beautiful, well thought out.
like, I love story. Like, I really do love narrative because, like, it's like that's what gets me into any game, any movie. I go, I want like a rich story I can just sink my teeth into and just get lost in.
Hmm.
I lo- like, I have a whole so upcoming project is I'm going to be doing a like my own portfolio project because I've spent the past year and a half like doing other people's work and like I want to really
Mm.
get into my stuff. And I'm going to be making a world I'm calling Dactylanthus, and it's going to be based off of my love of like dark fantasy and like dark elves and like space and like cosmic beings and creatures and stuff. And I'm gonna get into it and be doing that this year. Aside from like, I guess the other stuff I'm working on, like that's really the main thing that I'll be doing.
Hmm.
Rather than I've started doing is I already started doing like research and reference boards and things for it. But yeah, that's essentially my stuff.
Well, you're right about at the 6:30
Hey,
and filled
nice.
it up with a lot of interesting things in the journey of your life and some beautiful. That bluebird there, you couldn't blow that up, could you? Go
Which,
down a little
oh,
bit.
this one?
Yeah, right there.
That was my original. So before I did one with the whole like dark color palette for my
Oh, it's
deer.
gorgeous.
Because the original description, I took the description from I have a book called The Book of Imaginary Beings, and it's like an excellent like, hey, you want to just go draw like a creature real quick because it's like short paragraph descriptions. And the original coloration of it was a dark green to a blue. And I kind of want to throw my own twist on it, make it darker and more sinister. So I actually based it more off like a Canadian goose, but I
That
made it darker and gave it like ebony antlers that were like black and gold.
that central blue image is striking.
That's true. Also, doing it. Yeah, he went through a few iterations before it was one that I was personally settled with. Because I think why I got away from this is because it felt too much like a chimera, where it's
Mm.
like I just put wings on a muntjac. And I was like, I want to be more like, I was like, well, where's the design? Like, well, push the design more. So that's kind of how I ended up with like the final one. And I got um, like I know like these and stuff. This is like what happens when I just have time to just go to town on rendering.
I like
And
your purple sloth thing.
this guy,
That guy.
he was a blast. He was like really fun to do. Like, I want to get back to like doing like just taking the time out to like really render stuff out because like it looks cool.
That is very nice.
And then my thumbnails for them.
Very nice.
The detail you do is just amazing.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Like I call it CGI brain, where to me when I draw something, I am kind of like taking a mental photograph of that creature in its daily life. That's kind of how I like seeing like when I make something, when I draw something, I capture like a moment and I try to capture it in motion. Is like it's going through its life. It's either, either I'm playing a story or a movie through my head and I go, we've just captured a shot of it. Because like that's just how my brain is. Like I just see things like them like
Hmm.
in a moving picture essentially. Yeah, I had to lore for this bow, and this is when I kind of like this is the first portfolio piece I really took like seriously, and that was back in like 2018, I think it was. It was a
Hmm.
continuation of one I showed earlier, but where I had done notes for it. Annoyingly enough, it actually kept being mistaken for my official work by the fans.
Hmm.
Like it's so that was really annoying. But yeah, the one random character that I got commissioned to go do a long time ago. This is actually the client who he's had me do a bunch of creature work for an idea of his that I wish I could show that work because it is probably my best work so far, but things be as they be.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Well, that's some beautiful portfolio work.
thank you. I'm really looking forward to updating it. I felt bad because these two don't have any notes. Was it was really late and I put it up there and I realized like I should probably I should put my notes back in there because I took them off and I was like, let me put my notes back in there because it looks very bare. And I've been kind of shocked by the amount of people who have, even like at conventions, who like seeing the thought process behind the initial design.
Hmm.
Like I am honestly really shocked about that. I thought it'd be the opposite, where you have more people who want to see like the finished, like big, pretty illustration versus like the gritty, nitty, like sketch work and the thumbnails, but people really like the thumbnails. So
Yeah, they do. They like sketches. They like this is something the Chinese artists discovered in the Sumi work, the Chinese and Japanese artists, that the quick slashes of ink are what really got people.
interesting. Okay,
Well,
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to having a video of this whole meeting so that my son can see it because his artwork is similar to yours and he does Dungeons and Dragons drawings all the time and all kinds of funny things like that.
Very
And
nice.
yeah.
Is there any question you have to like, like I'm happy to answer like if there is anything I can help with because that is one thing I have also been doing and trying to do in the community also like ever since I moved here is trying to help like aspiring artists like get to that point because like I've been there. I understand how hard it is when you just feel aimless and
Hmm.
there's no resources and you have the internet which has way too many resources. And it's like how do I sort through the tutorials? How do I see what information is good and what's not? Because like my this was not how I envisioned my career going. Like freelancing was not something I had pictured myself doing, and I had to learn self-discipline and managing time and organizing myself and making sure I can get, you can meet your deadlines. And it like that was really hard to do. But, like I managed to do it after, practicing it and just I'd fall off the horse and I was like, okay, bad day, let's do it again. And eventually, like, where I'm at now, I go, I've grown a lot. So, like, if there's any questions or anything, like, I can answer, like, by all means.
Well, I think part of what was going on with the meeting is you were talking about your career, and a lot of us are going, "Yep, been there, done that."
I bet.
Totally understand.
Well, and the funny thing is that my husband worked at Valve. And
Wow.
so I thought about that as you were talking and everything. Just,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I really love about like this community too, is like the different age ranges and just getting validated of like the struggles I've gone through with other people, like others, like what you said, Donna, about it's like, no, we've been there. And it's like it's hard. And I go, okay, I feel reassured. I'm like, okay, I don't feel like I'm alone and like just wandering around trying to
Well,
like,
just remember this. Here's a saying I have about whenever I have to make a decision,
mhm,
you'll always make the wrong decision
yeah,
because either way you go, there's going to be good and bad about both of them. So wherever you go, you will make the wrong decision. Just relax and go with it.
yeah.
There's that
That's
saying, oh, the enemy of the good is the best.
I've never heard that
Yeah.
saying before.
Oh, I heard it from a gentleman who grew up in Trinidad and he had to get on a train to go to school.
Mhm.
Somebody, the whole bunch of adults did too. And he got shoved under the train and he lost his legs
Oh
Ew.
my gosh.
and he became a philosopher.
Oh,
That reminds me of the Milton Caniff cartoon about one of the World War II cartoons. There's a guy who got beat up, thrown in a garbage can, and it evidently, as the World War II saying was, "You got to be a philosopher."
I know, like, I've gotten a very, I guess what some people have told me, like, I get kind of, I have a, like, a lax and calm perspective on things where I've kind of just reached a point where I go, I just need to do something because that's one biggest thing this, like, this chasiness has taught me is I go, just pick a direction and go for it.
Hmm. Get on
Because,
the road and move.
yeah, and I go, in doing that, I go, I'm here now. Like, I'm mingling with you all. Like, it's obviously going somewhere.
Oh,
You
and
can,
the other thing about if you screw up, you will eat out on those stories for years.
yeah, yes. And it's a learning experience too. Like, you know, like I am forever a student. I will always be learning things. And I go, well, if this doesn't work out, like the studio thing, I know there's a lot of people who are jaded about, big studios, like the big companies. I go, I get that. I've heard the nightmare stories. And I go, I
Hmm.
still want to try it because I want to try it for myself. I want to see how, like, I want to see if it's for me because I go, I really think it might be. And if it is, awesome. And I go, if I don't like it, I can just leave. Like I take my art with me. I go like I don't leave my skills at the door. I go, my skills are here. It's like it's all here. So I go, I can just if I don't like it, I'm like, well, that wasn't for me. Let's try something else. Like,
Well, if you're looking at animation or something like this, all I know is I know a lot of different art worlds and writing worlds, and
mhm.
the nicest people I've ever known are animators.
Let's see. I know at the time I might want to get back into animation in the future. Um, because I can be too ambitious sometimes just for my own good. Like I would love to make like a short, like 30-second like animation of like I'll listen to music and just kind of think of the whole story in my head. I'm like, I'm watching a music video in my brain. I would love to get that down eventually, and I go probably later in my career I might. Like I know this is what I want to focus on right now, but eventually I go I'll probably be branching out to other avenues though, because like I do like animation's really cool. And I
Good.
really like I'm sure you've seen like some of those styles where it's like that ink that brush kind of that Japanese ink kind of style where like things are like
Oh,
flowing and they're moving and it's just
Uh-huh,
very
uh-huh.
illustrative like so it's a feast for the eyes.
oh, like those dream sequences in Princess Kaguya, if you ever saw that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very light. And there's some wonderful 2D things. I mean, there's hand-drawn things still being done, like Klaus, if
Mm.
anybody's seen that one.
I didn't realize that was hand drawn.
It is hand-drawn. Some parts of it are CGI, but that thing is basically hand-drawn.
Oh
I
wow.
know. Isn't that astounding?
Oh, I'm gonna get down there and look. Like, I love like I'll watch a movie like multiple times because like first time watch the movie, second time we watch it, and then I'll slowly start like, how do they model that? What's that detail
Hmm.
there? I love like kind of breaking down my head how how the people who worked on it did it.
Oh, it's
Like I
incredible.
I like the technical aspect of like this kind of work and stuff, and I can learn part of that from like my dad because he was the one who encouraged me to not just look at a movie, just look at a movie. He goes, pay attention to what's happening on the screen, pay attention to the story, pay attention to what they're telling you. And like when we went through a game, he's like, well, this could be done better. Like, why didn't they do this? And he would always propose a question that got me thinking about things. And I go, that really kind of kickstarted like my love for doing concept art because I like doing the breakdowns. I like thinking about the theoretical. What if it did this instead of that? What if
Your
it had
dad was a
tentacles
movie
instead of legs?
nerd.
He kind of was because we had like a movie night and everything. Like my family, like you can ask like my mom, we had a movie night every week for a while. He liked watching game trailers and stuff. Like he was kind of an outlier because he wasn't like he was born in 1950. So he was really like an outlier. Um, just I guess for someone his age, I guess. And just seeing that like I wish he could still be around to see like how like things progressed and like seeing like Halo 2's cinematics remastered. He would have loved to have watched that. Like he liked those things.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Well, can I thank you for a great talk? We've had about an hour here now, and I know that I'm going to have to move on for my evening.
Of
But
course.
in the meantime, this has been wonderful. and wonderful history. And thank you that we got to see the art and hearing about your dad. And anybody else have any questions or anything? I'm sure that you do.
It was a great talk. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Thank you so much.
It was a really great talk. Thank you so much.
Of course. And also my mother's here too. Like she's
Come on.
I know I didn't mention her a whole lot.
Good
but 'cause
job, Mom.
she's a hard worker. Like I get my work ethic from my dad and my mom. More my mom because she's a workaholic. So shout out to her.
Hey, Mom.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
But thank
Nice
you
to
all.
meet you.
This has been my favorite Cartoonist Northwest meeting ever, I think.
Oh my God. Really? Like
Yes, I've been very inspired.
Very good.
that's awesome. I'm glad. Like I'm really glad. So
Well, thank you for coming on board.
of
Thank
course,
you for joining us.
thank you for having me.